Dennis, welcome to the show.
Bradley, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on.
You got it, man.
So, what do you do? What is building men?
Wow, that's a deep way to start it. What do? I would say I help young men understand what it means to be in the world, a man in the world today. The motto of Building Men is to build men of strength, compassion, character, and integrity who will lead, serve, and change the world. So, big job. Started way back in, 2005 is when Building Men started. But the idea was planted in my head when I was a little boy, pretty much. And yeah, so what I do is I work with boys, individual group coaching. I'll go into schools and I'll set up programs for boys who are really an underserved population in schools right now. And I'll do some online coaching as well. But the idea is, helping kids that are growing up, middle school and high school boys, really try to understand what does it mean to be a man in the world. And I think a lot of young men are confused and even apologetic for being born male right now.
Yeah. There seems to be a rising culture of it's not okay to be a man. Masculinity is not good, and I think that's a danger to really everybody, not just men, women too. And because if you're a younger boy, if you're in your teenage years or even before, and you have this idea in your mind that being a man is bad, well, you're going to have all these psychological struggles and, maintaining friendships, relationships, and you're just going to feel lost. And, obviously nobody wants to feel lost in life, and whenever anybody does, it's not a good time.
Right.
What do you think most young men are struggling with? In your experience from working with a lot of younger boys, what seem to be some potent problems that are occurring?
So I just did a workshop with boys in North Jersey on Wednesday of this week. So what I did was I set up 20 different pieces of paper around a classroom, and each piece of paper had a word or a phrase on it. For example, one said relationships, one said family issues, one said peer pressure, bullying, drugs and alcohol, not fitting in, high school, body image, the future, the world, like bigger world issues, for example, like Israel, Palestine, things like that. And so now we're talking over the course of several meetings, I had about 150 boys participate, 5 groups or so, and I gave each boy 3 stick-it notes. And I said, okay, take a look around the room at these 20 different things that are up there right now, these 20 different concepts or ideas. Of everything up there, what are the 3 that you would say are occupying most of your mental space right now? It could be in a really positive way or in a really negative way. And it was interesting to see how the stick-it notes kind of made their way throughout the course of the classroom. The one that had the most, that was impacting the boys the most, was their future. It was something that they were so uncertain of. They didn't know what they wanted to do, who they wanted to be, where they wanted to go. Are they interested in going to college? Do they want to travel? What are they going to study? What if they're uncertain about it right now and they felt like as 8th grade boys, they're already behind the 8 ball if they don't know the entire trajectory of their life? The second one was family issues. That a lot of these kids were struggling with family dynamics and things like that, which I can certainly relate to. But then the rest were, a lot of boys struggle with body image, and it's something that we don't talk much about, but especially we can get into social media and its impact on boys especially. But it was really interesting. And then what we did is we had conversations, real conversations about, okay, what's going on here? And one thing that I would say too about that, Bradley, is kids really worry about, and I would say men in general, they're worried about being perceived as weak by friends, by the opposite sex, and by being seen as a failure. And those are like pervasive things that the boys think about. They mask it with a million different things, with this false bravado that they have. It could be they mask it by buffering through drinking, drugs, pornography, other things like that. But those are the things that they're really, really worried about. And it's them thinking that they're being seen as weak. So when I'm setting up these boys in a space where they're looking around, they're like, wait, you're feeling the same way too? Wait, I feel like this, you feel like this? Now there's like this normalization of it's okay to talk about this stuff too, instead of just calling everyone a pussy because they have some type of an emotion.
Yeah, those are some really powerful points, and that's the beauty of it. I would say we live in the United States, in a pretty individualistic culture where it's just me. I need to accomplish this by myself. I don't need to talk about my problems, especially as a man. And there seems to be this, the social standard of, you're a man, you're not supposed to talk about your emotions, you're not supposed to be vulnerable, you're not supposed to open up. That has seemed to be plaguing many men as they're younger, and it stays with you when you're older. I mean, I had to start to unlearn those processes, and I've struggled in my romantic partnerships to be vulnerable and open up because of my perception of what I should and shouldn't do. And obviously it's devastating to young men's mental health, because if in all these different areas, if you're struggling with your family and maintaining relationships, you're fearing your future, all this stuff is difficult stuff to fathom, especially if you're in something like 8th grade. I mean, that's when, shortly after you're starting to go through puberty, and you're trying to discover who you are.
Right.
And it's hard. I would say it's hard to discover who you are in a world where it seems like everybody's just keeping to themselves and people aren't conveying their true emotions and how they actually think about this. I think there's a lot of, especially in a group setting, when you're a teenager, I suppose this goes for men and women both, you want to fit in, right? If everybody's in a group, let's say there's 6 people, you're the 6th person, and everybody's agreeing on this concept, and you disagree with it, well, if you're in your teenage years and you're just starting to become, more conscious and aware of yourself, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to disagree with them, because you don't want to feel like an outcast. Right. You don't want to feel like you're different. And something that I have realized over the past few years along my journey is that being different is not bad, right? And I also noticed that it's the people that are different that most of us resonate most with, right? I mean, we can meet. I was telling you right before we started this, sometimes you can, especially in my age group, you can feel as though you're meeting the same person in a different body, because everyone's just like, yeah, I just want to party. It seems like nobody wants to have any deep conversations or talk about life, right? And so in my case, I can meet 10 people, let's say, and let's say 8 of them seem like they're the same person in a different body. Nothing wrong with that, right? You enjoy partying, you can do your thing, but I can't really connect with you on a deep level. And then the 2 people out of that 10 that I might meet that, they think about spiritual concepts, or they're focused on themselves, self-improvement, improving their relationships, life in general, well, then they're a little bit different to me, and I'm attracted to them. Right. And I think for even the people that are in the, partying and, you could say the normal society stuff, they still, like people that are different, right? And everybody does. We just like people that are different because it's interesting, right? If you hear if someone comes up to you and meet them, and they're like, yeah, I do this for my career, and, I think about this often. Like, well, I've never heard anyone say this. And you want to ask questions, right. You want to be curious, you want to ask about it. And so just to segue back, this fear of the future, especially among young men, I know it's something that I've dealt with a lot. I'm sure you have too when you were younger, and I would probably say between 95 and 100% of men deal with it. And for me, it seems as though the system and society that we live in, it's so like you were referencing before, it's so promoted that you need to have everything figured out by age 15, and if you don't know where you're going for college, then, well, you're going to be lost, and you're going to be broke, and you're not going to be successful, right? And there still seems to be this push of, you need to go to college, and if you don't, you're not going to be successful. And I have come to realize that everybody's different. Everybody's on a different journey. College works for a lot of people. It allows them to find their passions, their career that's meant for them, etc., etc. But there's also, things are a little bit different now, and I believe you can make an income and you can discover passions and find a different way that doesn't have to do with college, right? And from my experience, it seemed to have always been, you could do something else aside from college, but you're probably not going to be successful, so you should just go to college. And I sat down, no disrespect to, anyone in the school system and counselors, but I was sitting down with one of my counselors in high school one day, and I asked her, I'm like, I was honest with her, I'm like, I'm unsure about, if I want to go to college, I feel like there might be something else out there for me. And she says, oh, have you thought about trade school? And I'm like, oh, a little bit, but I don't think that's for me. And that seems to be the only alternative that anyone offers, right?
Or the military. That's it. One of those three things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, Bradley. I was a teacher. I taught for a short period of time. Went back and got my master's degree. So I have the education piece in school leadership, and I became a school principal in 2005. And so I was in the school system. I'm working with adolescent kids, and that was my mindset as well. Like, you have to go to school. You have to like kind of tell what schools are telling you to do. You have to do those things. Since I've been out of education, and I left public education in 2019, so it was a year before the world totally changed and education totally changed. And during that time, I was able to have several epiphanies around, like, are we telling kids the right thing in school? Are we providing the right information? Are we giving kids the skills that they truly need to be successful in the world? And I would say we're not. And this is coming from someone who has, I've gotten the education. I have been a part of that system for many years, and I think we're doing a disservice to kids. Like, at what point in school are you learning how to manage your own emotions? Because as adults, there are times when we are dysregulated, and we might not understand why things are happening. Like, we get really, really frustrated about something. When do we learn about, like, our past and traumas? Like, how do we handle those things? When do we learn how to cooperatively have a conversation in a group setting, managing conflict in a group setting? When do we learn how to speak publicly? You might be given an assignment, okay, you and this group of 3, you're going to present on a certain topic. But are you truly instructed how to stand up in front of a crowd and own a space and speak confidently about a specific topic? When do we learn about finances? When do we learn about investments? When do we learn those kinds of things? Applying for a loan? What about starting a small business? Things that could really benefit us. No, but we learn the state capitals 15 different times. We learn about, dinosaurs every year in school. Are certain things important? Absolutely. There's a book called Weapons of Mass Instruction, and the author's it's John Gatto, Gatto. Phenomenal book. He has since passed, but I read this book and it was like total mind shift for me around schools. And schools are basically developed more or less to create like subservient factory worker types. Not saying that all schools are doing that. Not saying that that's across the board. But kids come out of school and they're learning to walk in a straight line, sit down, raise their hand, be quiet, do what you're told. Here's a question. There's one right answer for that question, right? Now when I speak to my own kids about it, and I have 3, I tell them all, like, if college is in your future, great, but make sure that you're going to college with it in mind that there's a reason for it, not just to go and get banged up for 4 years and spend 180 grand, right? It's more along the lines of, is there a reason why? So to become a doctor, or do you need a specific certification that takes years of school? But if you're like, I want to go and find myself, there's other ways to do that. One thing that I do think college does is it gives kids an opportunity to go off and live on their own. Like, I would rather my son come to me and say, Dad, I want to start a business. I would rather take out a $25,000 small business loan. You come up with a pitch around this business. What is your idea around it? Have you done have you put in the blood, sweat, and tears of learning about it? Have you interned with someone? Do you have a mentor in this space? And then if so, okay, let's talk about how you're going to make money doing this. But learn as much as you possibly can about something that you're really excited about. So I agree with you, and I think that there's so much in that. I remember I was talking to a guy who was wearing a shirt. It was intriguing to me, much like the Seek Discomfort shirt that you're wearing right now. It said, you laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same. Mm. And that's what you're seeing right now in society, with everyone just kind of, it's ants marching. It's people following along in these droves because this is what they're being told to do.
Yeah, I came to this realization. It might have been John Gatto that said it. School teaches you what to think and not how to think. And obviously, how important is it that you have your own thoughts and you believe what you believe as a purpose, and there's meaning behind what you believe. I mean, I see so many videos on social media, for example, of people going up to random people on the street. Maybe they're college age, or they're a little bit younger, or they're even older, and they say, hey, what do you think about this? Or why do you believe this? Why do you not like this person? And they go, and so I realize that so many of us have these beliefs, but we have no reason to believe it. We're like, all right, so everyone, the common belief is, okay, you should believe this. So people just adopt it. They don't do their own research. They don't say, okay, do I actually believe this? Right? And so I came up with this little example of how important it is to declutter your mind, and you kind of have to imagine all of your beliefs as just this giant shelf with little drawers that you can pull out, right? And you have your 10,000 beliefs that you have about every area of life, etc., etc. And what you have to do is sit with yourself. Think about all of the beliefs that you have. Okay, why do I believe this? Do I actually believe it? Is it something that someone just told me and I just blindly believed it, or do I actually believe it? And so you open these drawers, and it's like, okay, one example is, okay, here's the name of the topic or the label for the drawers there. Okay, this is this belief. You open it up. Okay, there's no evidence in there. There's no reason for me to believe this. Do I actually believe this? And then you do a little bit of research. Oh yeah, I do believe this. But stick that in there, close it again, pull out the next drawer. Okay, it has a label on it. Oh yeah, no, there's all this evidence in here, all these reasons why I believe this. Yes, I believe it. Close it. Next one. Okay, there's a label here. Open it. There's nothing in there. Wait, this is a bullshit belief. But someone told me this when I was younger, and it's a limiting belief about myself. It doesn't help me, and there's no reason for me to keep this with me. You take it, you throw it away, right? And so many of us do not, especially as young men, we don't give ourselves the time to think about our beliefs and our life and find who we are, right? I feel as though, there's more. I mean, obviously, I'm 20 years old, so I haven't been alive for that long. But in my time, it seems as though there's more distractions than ever.
100%.
And especially when you're younger and you get distracted from when you're 5, 10, 15 years old, it's an absolute disaster. I mean, you go out to dinner with your family, I go out to dinner with my family. How many times you look around and you see a kid who's 3 years old with a giant iPad and he's just on that the entire time, the parents are ignoring them, just give that to them to shut up. It's like, it seems as though so many parents and people don't have the awareness of how that's going to mess up your child.
Oh, dude, I'll tell you what, when I got to dinner with my family, first of all, phones are off and we leave them in the truck before we even enter the restaurant. So when we go out there, and I usually have 1 or 2 conversation starters in mind. It's like, all right, superpower. Like, if you'd have any superpower in the world, what would it be? Just an example. But we go to the restaurant, and now, if you go into a restaurant without your phone, first of all, just look at all the people that are with their phones, right? It's like you just mentioned. It's absolutely absurd to me. But then they come around and they're like, oh, our menu's on the QR code. Just scan the QR code. And I say, we don't have a phone. And they look at me like, what do you mean you don't have a phone? I'm like, we're out to dinner as a family. Like, this is a time, if I'm going to go out and spend $150, $200, I'm not going to be sitting there looking through TikTok, or God forbid you don't have a phone to scan the menu. So it puts more onus on the wait staff to go and bring me an actual menu. I get some looks now when I go into local restaurants. They know when I walk in, they're like, here you go, here's our paper menu. And there's just something to looking at a menu when you're at the restaurant. You could discuss things and hand it around. Some of them have the gigantic menus that are the size of a kite, but that's an example. And when I see little kids out at a restaurant, like you mentioned, with the iPads, it's like, as a parent, you have a finite amount of time with your kids. My son is 18 years old. He's a freshman at the University of Delaware. He's studying materials engineering. And I've had conversations with him. He's like, Dad, I love math. I love engineering. That's what I want to do. Okay, go do it. I had a conversation with him recently, and I said, there's some crazy stat that says you have, from the time your kid is 0 to 18 years old, you have this amount of time with them, right? However many years it is. I think it's 1,000 weeks you have with your kids. It's something along those lines, 1,000 weeks. From the time that they turn 18 years old or they graduate high school, you have 1 year with them, 1 full year of days with them. So 365 days with them, just you and them, for the rest of their life. So as a parent, if you think about it, you have kids that are 3, 4, 5 years old, and you're with them and you're letting them play on an iPad or whatever, turn that shit off, put it away, embrace that time with your kids, because you're not going to get that back. And to your point, Bradley, about us being, especially young men, what are we thinking about? We're opening up these drawers that you spoke about. The generation now, it's being born in a digital age where your whole life cell phones have just been a part of everything. Cell phones, iPads, whatever. You don't have time in this generation just to sit and think about, how do I think about this? Because any minute that you're there without your phone, it's become an extension of who you are. So if your phone, I was with a group of kids I had just mentioned. I travel around and I do building men groups in schools. But I asked the boys, how much time do you think you're spending on your phone in a day, right? Like over the course of a week, what's your average screen time? And I had them guess. So the average guess was about 3 hours. And the average screen time was about 7 hours a day. These are, anywhere between 13 and 17, 18-year-old boys, about 7 hours a day. The low being 0, a kid doesn't have a phone, and the high being 14 and a half hours on average for a week. 14 and a half hours. The kid might be up for 17 hours, 14 and a half hours on his phone. But I said to the boys, if your phone is next to you, right, and the screen is facing up, and you're sitting there, and you have notifications popping up on your phone, how long do you think that you can wait without feeling the need to look at the phone? And they're like, well, it depends what the notifications are. I'm like, well, whatever they are, like every single notification you could possibly get. So you're getting these constant ding, 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 ding of notifications. And they're all like, we'd have to check. And I talked about like what it does to your brain, like physiologically. It's like a heroin withdrawal with not being able to interact with your phone or social media or whatever it is. But my point being that we don't have space as young men to sit and think about how we think. When I do my online group coaching with boys, we have every other week we do a meeting, and then there's a challenge. And one of the challenge I had with the boys was, well, journaling is one of the biggest things you can possibly do. If like you want to have one habit to do on a regular basis, start writing shit down. Whenever I'm in a school, I get journals for the boys. Day one, we start talking about journaling. Some of it is a brain dump in the morning. Some of it is practicing gratitude. Some of it is asking ourselves deep questions that we never really thought about, like that little thing that you're pulling out, right, the drawers. But I talked to the boys about, okay, here's your challenge for the next 2 weeks. Find 1 hour, and during that 1 hour, what I want you to do is turn off your phone, put it away. I want you to find a space where you can sit in the dark for 30 minutes with nothing else. So sit in the closets, turn the light off in your room. You're not going to sleep. You're just going to sit and think for 30 minutes with nothing else. And then as soon as you're done, what I want you to do is write for 30 minutes. It's 1 hour. And bullshit if you don't have that hour. I know you have the hour because I know how much time you're spending on your phone. And what's going to happen is you're going to unlock some shit in your head that you didn't know was there. There's going to be some really crazy, interesting things. There's going to be some really dark things that you're going to think about. But what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to understand who you are on a deeper level, not just what you're following on TikTok and on Instagram and on whatever else, right? So it gives us this chance to expand ourselves and to truly think about who we are as young men.
Yeah, and then in turn it will allow you to be your authentic self, because for some of these boys, it might be before that moment, they never even had any idea of who they truly are. It's, you see pretty commonly among, early teenage boys, they're using the same language, the same slang, they seem like they're acting similar.
Liz,
right.
Yeah.
And
God.
And everybody is an individual. Everybody has different different qualities, different passions, different ideas, different personalities. But we like you were talking about before, we mask that and we put on a front so that we can fit in, right? And the issue that this does is that you don't allow anybody to know the real you. And even more deeply of a problem, you could say, is that you don't get to discover who you are. And if you don't know who you are, well, that goes back to what we were saying before, but you're just going to feel lost. Mm-hmm. Because, if you don't know what you're passionate about, what you believe, anything about you, well, how the hell are you supposed to know what life trajectory you want to do, or any idea at all of what you would potentially want to do? And so, I mean, that's a beautiful exercise that you did with them, because I'm sure it had enlightening results, because, because it's, with the phone, it's, I do my best when I'm working on my laptop or doing any sort of work to put my phone either on the other side of the room or in a completely different room. Mm-hmm. So that, because if it's right next to me, well, then every 15 minutes I'll look at it, and then I'll pick it up, and 10 minutes later I'll put it down, and then I'll get back to my work, and I just won't focus, and I won't get things done. And something else I think about is, someone else brought up this point on probably another podcaster of, what are you missing out on because you're distracted so often? And I think after I heard that, a few days later, I had a realization of an experience I had. I was doing some work on my computer, and I had my phone next to me. I was just every 15 minutes distracting myself, whatever, right? And my friend calls me. He's like, hey, me and blah, blah, blah are going out to eat. You want to come? I'm like, I can't. I got this work to do. But if I took my phone and I put it in a different room and I just focused on my work, I would have been done by then. And he would have called me and I would have said, yeah, no, let's do it. I'm finished my work. I'm good, right? And so I'm thinking to myself in my personal life now, and I think something that's very important for everyone to do is, what are you missing? What's missing out on? Because this, as we're talking to each other right now, and as we look around, this is life. And when you focus your attention on a screen for so long, you are quite literally in a different reality. Your perception, for the most part, of this outer reality goes out the window, right? Someone could come and, rob you, or at worst case scenario, or do something you might not even notice. And so I think, especially as young men and a society, we need to take our awareness back, and then in turn that gives us our power back and allows us to rebuild or build that masculine energy within ourselves so that we can figure out what we want, or an idea of what we want throughout our life, and we can go after that 100%. Instead of feeling lost all the time.
So there's a guy, his name is Nir, Niraleal. He wrote a book initially called Hooked, and he's like a psychologist, neurobiologist, and he's a big tech guy as well. So what he did was he basically figured out how do you use an algorithm to hook people in to social media. Like, how do we mess with people's brains enough to where it's that you need the constant dopamine hit, right? And so this guy, fascinating guy, he recognized like what he did was so destructive that he wrote an antidote to his initial book called Indistractable. And so Indistractable, highly recommend people read this book. So we record this episode early December. I'm going to be interviewing Nir at the end of December. It's like the 21st, 22nd. He's in like Indonesia. So like we had to figure out the time change or whatever. So I'm interviewing this guy. I'm so excited to interview him because the book Indistractable made a big difference in my life. Like he talks about these liminal moments that we have. So for example, you just mentioned, having your phone there and wanting to check as you're doing work. Think about if you're in the line at the grocery store. You go to the grocery store to pick up 4 things. As you're walking up to the line at the grocery store, there's 3 people in front of you. What do? Immediately, we pick up our phone and we look at our phone because there's a moment of space that happens that we don't know how to fill the void of not being constantly amused and entertained or having something else tell us what we should be thinking. So in those moments, you get to a red light. God forbid, in the time that you're at a red light, you don't look at your phone. It's possible to not do this. I just did an Instagram reel. It's not published yet, but I said, I said Aristotle, Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King. What do these men have in common? They were all able to poop without looking at their phones because they didn't have them. So it's possible to do it. I asked the boys, I said, do you guys poop with your phones? They're like, yeah, what else would we do during that 3 minutes when we're in the bathroom by ourselves? So these liminal moments that we have, we need to fill it with something because there's a void, and God forbid we think about something. In the book Indistractable, the guy Nir talks about an activity, and I would encourage everyone listening or watching to do this activity. And so the activity is there's going to be 2 things that you're going to do like almost simultaneously. And the first is you're going to write the 26, or you're going to write this statement. And the statement is, multitasking is worse than a lie. So you write out these letters, multitasking is worse than a lie, and then underneath that you write numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 26. So you write the first statement out, multitasking is worse than a lie, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 26. You time yourself doing it. Usually it takes people 45 seconds, 50 seconds to do it. Then what you do is you stop and you do it again, but this time you're going to write M, and then a 1, U, and then a 2, L, and then a 3, T, and then a 4. So you're going back and forth, remembering, okay, what am I writing, the sentence that I'm writing, and then the number. So your brain is like switch taxing back and forth, and usually it takes double the amount of time because your brain is like focused on one thing, and then now you're going back and forth. And when we're looking at our phone as we're doing work, so I'm in the middle of like some deep work, and I go to look at my phone, just by doing that, it's going to take me about 60 seconds to fully integrate with whatever I'm doing. So if I'm doing that 7, 8, 9, 15 times an hour, I'm missing out on so many opportunities to just get into the deep work. So I would recommend, look at your phone, put it away in the other room like you do, do like 25, 30 minutes of work or whatever it is, and then go give yourself 2 minutes to look at your phone. You're going to save yourself so much time on task than the switch tax that it's going to take back and forth.
Yeah, I've also noticed, you know, you can, especially when you're doing some deep work, like you mentioned, or just really focused on a task, checking your phone will interrupt the flow state that you're entering while you're doing it for, you know, a decent amount of time. And obviously, if you interrupt it, well, then it's hard to get back in it. And the flow state is a beautiful state. I mean, you're so focused on the work, the passion, whatever the task is at hand that you're focusing on, and it seems as though nothing else exists in that moment. That's when you're the most productive and you get the most done and you're the most content with doing the work that you're doing. And, you know, these constant distractions eliminating us from finding ourselves. And, you know, I might even go to the extent of saying this is a giant psyop of further getting human beings to be distracted and not find themselves. Because, I mean, in the society and the way, you know, everything is structured, if everybody found themselves and everybody followed their passions, well, obviously the world would fall apart. People wouldn't want to work, you know, boring jobs anymore or be a garbage man, right? And of course, in the society we live in, those jobs are necessary. But, you know, if everybody discovered their passions and discovered themselves, the world would no longer operate. And, you know, you could argue that, you know, obviously everybody would be much more content and happy with their life. But, you know, we're not at the point where we can break down the system and rebuild it, because I could sit here and say, hey, you know, it would be better if everybody followed their passion, but I don't have an idea of how we could restructure this entire society. So I'm not gonna move towards the vision and promote, okay, let's knock down the system, right? But we are in a system that isn't completely flawed. Of course, there are many flaws, but we do have the power to, you know, as many of us as possible, you and me doing our podcast and talking to people, getting more people to realize their potential and help them follow their passions and figure out what they really want for themselves, recapture their belief system, allow them to indulge in and discover their masculine energy and commit to that. Because, I mean, what's your idea of what happens when men don't believe masculinity is good and they'll do everything to avoid becoming it?
There's a quote. There was a book that I read. The guy who wrote the book, I believe, was Stefan Arnio. Has since passed, but it was something along the lines of like, strong men, hard times create strong men. And so there's a quote. It's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. And I believe that we are in a hard time right now. And so there's definitely this pendulum, Bradley, that swings back and forth. Like, I think back to hearing stories of my father's generation growing up. And there was like this, it was like the post World War II, Korean War, like right before Vietnam time frame, right? So there was a bit of partying, but like men were men. But it was also to almost like an Andrew Tate spot where they're like, well, I'm the man, you know, where's my dinner, bitch? And, you know, men don't show emotions, like, you know, suck it up, man up. Like, it was very, it was like hyper aggressive masculinity, right? But then what happened was, you know, as we got more into like workplace equality and women's lib and feminism, like it started to swing in the opposite direction, to where, you know, as I'm graduating from college, it swung to a space where I feel like men, and especially now, men were afraid to be men. And it's almost like you see guys that are following their women around, you know, carrying their purse, tucking their dick between their legs, and, you know, like, well, what do you want to do? I don't care. Well, what do you want to do? And it's like, so women were forced to become way more masculine because the men that they're with were way more feminine. And I don't think that that's a good thing for society either. So what do? We need like this balance between, I talk to boys all the time, like there is so much strength and vulnerability, but being able to express that vulnerability in a way that you are still able to be in a masculine frame. Like, I'm going to use this situation I went through, and like I tell the first Building Men meeting that I have every year with boys, or in a new situation with boys, I share like a story from my upbringing with my own father, who was not a good role model for me. He was an abusive man. And so I share a couple stories from that. And they're stories that I get choked up and I get emotional with. So these boys see me the first time that they ever see me, and I'm a big dude, 6'4", 225. Like I walk in, I have a bit of a presence there, but they see me getting choked up in a story, and I'm expressing a level of vulnerability. But I'm also like, what happened to me when I was a boy? It wasn't my fault. Like all the stuff that I endured when I was a boy was not my fault, but it's 100% my responsibility to deal with. And then I'm like, and now I take it as such a privilege. So I'm so happy that I went through all the stuff that I went through, because now I get to share it with you guys. And when I'm able to express that vulnerability in a way that allows them to connect, they're like, huh, this fear of failure, this fear of seeing weak, I have control over how I think about that. Could I potentially use this as something that can fuel me to then help other people?
Yeah, and I mean, that's beautiful. And I've embodied a very similar, or you could say the same mindset around that. Is I suffered from depression for a few years, and you know, of course during that moment it sucked. During those moments when your father treated you that way, they sucked. But I've been able to genuinely feel grateful for what I went through, because now, I mean, I tell people all the time now, I wouldn't have a podcast, I wouldn't have even started improving myself, I wouldn't have became a self-development coach, I wouldn't be doing any of this if I didn't go through that, right? And so it's created such a blessing in my life, and for me to share that information and knowledge that I've gained in overcoming my struggles to other people, because, you know, and so in a way, or confidently, I can pretty much say, the depressive state was a blessing in disguise.
And you even said you struggled with depression. It wasn't like I am depressed, or I was. There's a big piece to attaching that to who you are as a human being, rather than that is something that you as a person are going through, not that defines who you are as a human being.
Right.
It's a big difference.
That's a really good point, because we're always labeling ourselves in society to say, you know, for that exact example, I am depressed, I suck, I'm not good enough, etc., etc., etc. You go down the line. And what this does is it limits your life as a whole. It limits your opportunities. It limits you to see what's right in front of you, but you have this veil over your eye that you just, because of your mindset, you quite literally can't see it. And what I always encourage is, if you can just make the little mindset shift of, okay, well, maybe it's possible for me to be better. Then the veil might open a little bit, and you might start to see something like that greatness that is right in front of you. And it just takes a little bit of improvement, a little bit of time to get yourself to that place and out of your depressive state, your anxiety, feeling lost, etc., etc. And I mean, I would say everything that we're talking about, it all goes back to the distractions. The reason, not the sole reason, but a massive reason as to why, you know, it seems like everybody's struggling with mental health today. Nobody knows what they want out of their life, etc., etc. Their relationships are failing. It's because most of us don't know what to do to find out these things and how to go throughout life, and we also don't try to find it out. We just constantly numb ourselves with pornography, drugs, alcohol, partying, hookups, etc., etc. And deep down, I would say everybody probably knows that it's not fulfilling them, but they don't know what else to do, because obviously, well, you know, we could sit here and lay down the statistics and how bad pornography is for you and drinking alcohol all the time, etc., etc. But the social norms are stronger than the science, right? It doesn't matter if everybody knows, everybody who's an alcoholic, everybody who's my age that drinks alcohol all the time and parties 4 times a week, they know alcohol isn't good for them. But since everybody else is doing it, well, they're just going to do it too, right? And this just goes into how we've all been brainwashed to not think for ourselves. And so we value so much everybody else's opinion of us and needing to fit in, even as we're older. And, you know, I would argue that this prevents us from finding ourselves if we just, you know, going back, we're just constantly distracted. You want to find happiness, you want to find contentness, you want a fulfilling relationship with others and yourself. As horrible as a thought this is, you have to put down your phone.
Dude, and like the Seek Discomfort shirt that you're wearing, Like one of the pillars that I have with building men, like I have 12 character pillars and 12 pillars of healthy habits. One of them is intentional discomfort. And so as you're talking, like one thing with intentional discomfort is like, does it feel great like to have like 4 or 5 beers, to smoke some weed or whatever? Sure, right? But what you said is the social norm associated with, like, we know the science behind it, yet what we're doing is we are finding immediate pleasure in it, and we like the pleasure receptors in our brain are like, I want more of that. Like anybody that's listening or watching right now, if you truly think about pornography, like what do you get out of that? So what, you nut? Like you have like that 3-second, like, oh, that felt really good. But if you like really think about what is the benefit that you are getting from that, it's there's nothing good at all that comes from it. So is it more challenging in the moments to be like, no, I'm not going to do it? Sure. Until it becomes just habitual, you're not doing it. And this is something like I'll talk candidly about it. Like when I was married for 17 years, I got divorced in 2020. During like 10 years of my marriage, I suffered with pornography. Like I didn't have like an intimate partnership with my ex-wife. And so I was looking at porn, and it was like, I felt disgusting afterwards. There's never a time when you're done that you're like, wow, I feel so, it's not like getting out of the gym. You feel like such a scumbag, right? And so I lived in that mindset for a while. And then I went through a spot during COVID where I like totally reinvented my life before I started the podcast. And one of the things was I stopped watching pornography. And it was a huge shift in my life. For those people, especially in your age group, now that you have porn whenever you want it, you know, like there's a stat now, it's something along the lines of like the average 13-year-old boy now can see more porn and like more naked women in 6 hours than like the most, you know, powerful, richest king in the history of the world can see in his entire lifetime. Just because you could just swipe through, no, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. No, here we go, let me get a little bit deeper into it. And before you know it, the things that are like turning kids on, they need more and more, and it needs to be more aggressive, and like all of a sudden you need like a girl with like 9, you know, donkeys and freaking midgets. It's like, what the fuck is happening here? So like I went on a total rant there, but that's what happens. It's like we're retraining our brains in such a negative way. That's one of the things that I would recommend. Like really think about your relationship to your phone first and foremost, and then what are you using your phone for? Are you serving the technology? And by watching porn, by scrolling through social media, you are serving the technology, unless it's like, I'm really interested in this. Let me go on and find out this information so I can think about it. Let me look through, find it, and I'm going to put it down, and I'm going to think or write about it. Or is this technology serving you, right? An alarm clock, that technology is serving you. If I'm using it to listen to an audiobook or podcast, the technology is serving me, right? So it's really to be intentional around what is the actual, your association with the technology, and what is your goal in using that in that moment.
Yeah, that's an incredibly powerful exercise to do. And going back a little bit to the pornography aspect and, you know, the severity of it. And I know when I watched it a ton, obviously after, you know, you have the, what people call in the online space, the post-nut clarity of after the fact, you're like, well, why did I do this? Mm-hmm. This wasn't worth it, right? And every time I would tell myself, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Forget about if there's a mirror anywhere near and you like look at yourself, you're like, oh, am I that person? Yeah. You're like totally disgusted with yourself.
Yeah. And it also, there's also the conversation about how it changes the way you think about a sexual experience with a woman, especially if you haven't had one before, mm-hmm. right? Because, you know, let's say you're a teenage guy and, you know, you're watching all the porn in the world, and then eventually you have an experience with someone. You have this expectation that they have to be doing all this, and you can treat them this way right. without asking, and this and that. And of course, there's, like, let's say you're more aggressive in a sexual manner, and your partner is okay with that, great, right? That's where the communication comes in. But it seems as though there's this expectation of, you know, we can automatically do this, and I can automatically do this, and it's fine. But, you know, it's not always fine.
And the tough thing is, I totally agree with what you're saying, like, what your expectation is when you're watching the gangbang or whatever the hell is that you're watching, that you think all girls are going to be able to like stand on their head and put their feet up onto the ceiling. Like that doesn't always occur. Like that's not what real women like do or want even. But if you're unable to have a conversation about, okay, these are the things that I'm into, what are you into? Like, let's talk about it. If that's uncomfortable for you to have that conversation, then you shouldn't be engaging in the experience in the first place, right? That's really hard to talk about like these things, but that's what has to happen, right? Especially in today's society where like you need to have like, you know, blood tests and written consent, and there needs to be like video evidence that you weren't like trying to coerce the woman into. So like what, like how are you having those conversations? They're tough to do. Those conversations are hard to have, but like seek discomfort. Like that's more of what should be happening in society.
Yeah, and opening up as a whole that I'm learning, and just being vulnerable as a man is so powerful, and I think and so, you know, there's the whole big perception of why you shouldn't be vulnerable is because, you know, everyone's saying women find it unattractive, they want you to just be a man all the time, they want you to be masculine. And I would still argue that there are some things that you don't need to tell a girl, you keep to yourself or deal with yourself. But there are times where you can share things, especially like you were referring to before. You could be in your masculine frame and still open up about something. And that will just in turn allow her to feel more connected to you. I mean, I look back at some of my past relationships where I didn't really open up much, and it would become an issue, and, you know, my past girlfriend would be upset that I want to open up to her or whatever, and I would be like, oh, well, I'm just dealing with it myself, you know, I don't want to talk about it. And what I didn't realize is that now creates a thought in her mind where it's like, okay, well, he's not talking to me, he's not communicating with me.
Who's he talking with? Is there another girl? Right.
And it just allows her to feel disconnected from our relationship. And I, you know, recently, this was a recent occurrence and realization for me of like, oh wait, this is how me not opening up about this affects someone else, and, you know, we need to have a conversation about it. And something that I've realized also is that we so often don't talk about our needs and our wants and desires. Of course, like you were saying, with the sexual experience, but also just in a relationship partner in general, right? I mean, you might have certain beliefs or standards in a romantic partnership that you aren't willing to compromise on, for example. Some of them you are willing to compromise on. Some of them you might not be able to compromise on, but you should, etc., etc. But we don't have the conversation, right? We don't, right before we get into a relationship, we don't say, hey, you know, if you do this, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not okay with that, right? And so what happens, and what I noticed in my own past experience, is there would be a concept in my mind of, okay, I'm not okay if a girl does this. And then she would do it, and it's not anything super severe, but it's something that, you know, I'm not okay with. And I would get angry, and then I caught myself eventually, and I was like, wait a minute, how can I get angry at someone for doing something that I never told them I wouldn't be okay with, right? And so we have, I think men and women both, we expect each other to read each other's minds, but we can't, especially because our minds work so differently, and we think about things so much in a different light, and that's okay, and it's okay to be different, but we need to work and have conversations to understand each other, because if we can't understand, well, then we can't ever really confidently move forward and be in a successful relationship.
It's such a good point, and like, boundaries are not set for another person, boundaries are set for ourselves to be like honest and integrous with who we are, right? So if I'm setting a boundary, it's not for you, it's for me to keep track of who I am. So I'll give you an example. It could be like you're dating someone, and in previous relationship, it was cool for her to have like a guy best friend, right? And you're going into the relationship thinking, that's not cool with me. And this is the narrative that you're playing with yourself. And you go out with your friends one night or doing whatever, and she's on the phone with Billy until 2 o'clock in the morning. And she's like, yeah, I was up late talking to Billy on the phone, and you flip shit. You're like, what the hell, this and that. But that wasn't a conversation that you have. And in her narrative, that's an okay thing for her to do, is to be friends with this dude. And whether or not that's okay with you, it's here nor there. But the fact that you didn't have that conversation saying, like, this is not okay with me, or this is how I feel about it. It's up to her whether or not she wants to, you know, if you tell her that this is not okay, we'll have a conversation around it. But I think what guys do, a couple things. One, initially, and I know I've struggled with this in my past, when something happens, when we feel as though we are being like blamed for something, or however it comes across, we get defensive. And we feel like we have to protect who we are. And so our fists come up and we respond in a way that's not healthy or productive. So we get defensive, and then we react instead of respond. So we react from a place of like heightened level of emotion. And I do feel like it's good for men to be like, listen, here's something that I'm struggling with right now. Just so you know, if I'm being a little bit quiet, I have a lot on my mind about this email that I received from my boss, and it's got me a little bit whatever. I'm going to be fine. I just wanted to let you know this is how I'm feeling right now. You don't have to do anything, or can you do this for me? So I think that's okay to like express that level of vulnerability with your romantic partnership. I don't think you should be like a sack of goo and always be like, oh, I'm so sad about this. Like at a certain point, women are gonna be like, dude, like grow a set here too. So I think it's appropriate to be like, if you're feeling something, be like, listen, I'm feeling really stressed out right now, or I'm feeling really emotional about something that just happened in my family. I just wanted to let you know. And then to be able to express like, do I need something for you? I just want to like let you know. I want you to be a little bit into my world. And as men, what we try to do, I think in my experience, when a woman brings a problem to us, it's like, all right, well, here's what you do. You do this, this, and this. You get here, you go here, you organize it this way. What I've learned to do over doing it wrong for many, many years is in those moments, I'll ask, okay, do you want space here? Do you want me to give you some type of a solution that I can come up with? Or do you just want my shoulder? Do you just want me to hug you and be like, all right, come on, tell me about it? And you want my ear, you want to put your head on my shoulder, cry, do whatever. So one of those three things. Do you need space? Do you just need to get away and think about it? Do you want me to be like, all right, well, you know, Brenda said this, well, she's a fucking asshole, so blah, blah, blah. Or do you just want me to give you a hug and whatever? And once you could do that as a man and like offer those three different options, it's a game changer. Because one, you're listening. You're not trying to just blatantly solve the problem, or you're just not like, oh, fucking Jesus Christ. You're listening. You're experiencing it in a different way. That has been one of the biggest game changers as far as like a way that I show up now in the relationship that I'm currently in.
Yeah, that those are super powerful points, and those are concepts that I've been discovering very recently too, and noticed that I wasn't doing that in my past relationships, because especially like as a man, you're wired to find a solution, and because maybe 8, 9 times out of 10 when your girl comes to you and she says, hey, I'm dealing with this, you know, blah, 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 this person said this, etc., you quite literally may have the exact answer that will solve her problem. Mm-hmm. The issue is she might not want to solve the problem, right? And in our eyes, it's still, it's so like, easy. It's stupid. It's like, oh, come on, why don't you want to solve it? This will make your life better. But what we have to understand, like you're saying, is, you know, that's how she might be feeling right now. She doesn't want the answer. She just wants you to listen to her. And we're wired a little bit different in that aspect.
And this was the visual that I needed to help me come to terms with that idea, because I totally agree with you. And when she comes to you and you're like, I know exactly how to solve this, it might not be a solution that she's looking for. Men's brains, in my opinion, like I look at it as like organizing the garage. It's something that I need to do tomorrow. I get to do tomorrow. I'm taking everything out of the garage. I need to find the spot for the tools are going to go here. I moved to a new place recently, and it's just a shit show in the garage. Tools are going to go here. This is where the lawn equipment is going to go. The sports equipment. There's going to be some beach stuff over here. Like just in case I need to pull my car and there's a space. But in my mind, the garage is going to look a certain way. It's going to be organized as such. So when I walk into the garage, if I need, you know, a hammer and nails, okay, they're there by the tools, and this is where it's going to be, and this is where I'll put it back. Women's brains are not organized in that way from my experience. It's more like a gigantic ball of yarn, right? And it's all interwoven together. So when she comes to you about the problem that she just had with Tiffany at work, that problem that she's telling you about might have nothing to do with that problem. It might have to do with the thing that you left the toilet seat up yesterday. Or it could be when she was little, her mom didn't pack her lunch. It could be all connected together in a way that we don't, as men, quite understand, because we're more linear and, you know, logical in how things are placed in our minds. And it's not, one's not right or one's not wrong. We're just different in that way. And I think like men are more like women are more like the liquid, you know, the ocean. It like flows and it's all kind of flowing and interconnected together. And men are more like the cup that you pour it into, you know, like to enjoy it in its way. Like you need this like solid thing to be able to enjoy it fully. And my experience now with my partner, Julie, is like, she is a very feminine person. And I need to be able to hold that femininity. Like you hear like men like holding space. I didn't really get it until like I was able to use some type of a visual in that way. So I just think that we're wired a little bit differently, and it's a good thing. I don't think we should create this androgynous culture where men and women are exactly the same across the board.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like some individuals are trying to push the narrative of that men and women are completely the same, and in certain aspects of society, like for example the advances of women being able to work and all that type of stuff, that's good. But we it seems as though these people are transmitting that men and women are the same on a psychological level in every single way, and they're exactly the same. Women can do what men can do, men can do what women. There are certain things that women are better at doing than men, and certain things that men are better at doing than women, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, and that is why in most cases men are attracted to women and women are attracted to men, because we complement each other, right? In terms of, if we can grant ourselves an open mind and listen, it's like women can teach you so much about emotional vulnerability and et cetera, right? But you have to be willing to listen. And then I can't think of an example of what men, an exact specific example of how men can teach women, or men are pretty good at teaching things of just, hey, this is how you do this, et cetera, et cetera. And my thought process now is that feminism used to be to allow women to be as equal as men, and now it's to get women to be better than men, and we don't need men, we should kill all of them, et cetera, et cetera. And of course those are the extremists, right? But like you're saying, we're different, and not only is it okay, but it's beautiful.
And it, when going back all the way to the beginning, when you're like, what do you do? Like, tell me about a little bit about what you do. There was a time in our country and society where boys were way outperforming girls in school, especially in the area of science and math. So this was like the late 70s, early 80s time frame where boys were like 3-to-1 as far as their success on national and standardized tests, acceptance into college, what have you. And so we looked at that as a society and said, boys are outperforming girls in science and math. What's wrong with the schools right now? What are the schools doing wrong that this is the case? I mentioned before the pendulum swung all the way in the other direction, where girls are outperforming boys currently in 2023, almost 2024, in every single high school subject area, with the exception of like a shop type class and physical education. That they're pretty much equal in that area, but everything else, girls are outperforming boys in everything else across the board. Society looks at that and they say, what's wrong with the boys? Not what's wrong with the schools, not what's wrong with like how we're handling this situation, what's wrong with the boys? So it's become so far in the other direction now. When you look at like numbers that we have, metrics that we have, which is one of the reasons why I initially started the Building Men group in the first place, again, all the way back to 2005. When I first started the group, like I recognized boys were getting suspended at an alarming rate, getting tossed out of class, their grades were bad. It was such like a disparity to me. I needed to do something about it. Currently, like when you look at disciplinary statistics, so 70% of the suspensions in the state of New Jersey are boys. 70% of expulsions are boys. 75% of D's and F's that are given out in high school are boys. 95% of students that are placed in a juvenile facility, juvie, are boys. So when we look at that and we're saying like, what's wrong with the boys? What's wrong on the societal level that that's the case? When boys go through school and they don't have an adult male role model, they are 3 times more likely to commit a violent crime, and they're 4 times more likely to live in poverty as an adult if they don't have an adult role model. So what are we doing to help these boys? Boys in general are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than girls. So the numbers are staggering. And it speaks to like when you mentioned what am I doing? That's why. There's such a need for it. But it's so hard to be like, yes, the boys need help. Society's being like, oh no, boys don't need help. Boys have all the privileges in the world. They're born with penises, so everything is given to them. Well, they're really, really struggling right now. And what I'm trying to do is like normalize that conversation. Is it okay to say that you're struggling? Yeah. Is it okay to say that you need help? Yeah. But is it also really important to seek discomfort? Yes. Is it important to be able to be assertive and stand up for yourself and have self-discipline and hold yourself accountable? Yes, that too. So it's like, how do you help build a man? It's like there's so much that goes into it, but because again, we'll connect it to the phone too, because there's so much of it is like, it's immediate gratification. I'm just seeing like, what is the most immediate thing? It's really hard for young men to connect with men. Here's another stat for you, and then I'll stop because I get going on this topic and I go nuts. On average, this is, I think that it was like the average 14 or 15-year-old boy. In 1 week, they spend 44 hours in 1 week on social media, interacting with their phone, watching television, or playing video games. 44 hours in a week. And I would even argue that might even be on the low end, 44 hours. The same boy, on average, spends in direct conversation with an adult male 30 minutes on average over the course of a week. So 90 times more interaction with a screen than with an adult male that could potentially be a role model. So you want to say what's a problem with boys right now? I would say that is it in a nutshell. Like, who is leading them? It's a two-dimensional object that's leading them, not a person that could help them with situations and help inspire them and help motivate them for the future.
Right, and younger boys usually have a lot of energy. They want to move around. They want to do physical exercise, and 7 hours a day, you're forced to sit down and just shut up and listen, right? And there's a time and place for sitting down and listening to someone talk to you about a certain topic and learning. But if you're doing that for most of your day, and then on top of that, sitting there for 7 hours a day, then you go home and you just sit on your phone for the rest of your day, well, then that's the ultimate shitter of a life circumstance, right? Yep. And that's the normality, right? And there's no, I guess you could say there's rising talk about, it's phone addiction is bad and this and that, but nobody's actually really trying to change it. It's just like we recognize things are there. We're just like, okay, whatever. I mean, it's fine. It's not that bad. But of course, phones are still somewhat new of a technology, and I think over the next few decades, we're really going to see the negative effects of how these addictions are just going to be plummeting people's mental health and lives. And we already see that, right? We already see the mental health struggles of men and women both just down, 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 and it's not improving at all. It's just getting worse and worse, and it sucks, right?
And you mentioned the idea of what young men need or boys need, that like they're more active inherently, right? And so the idea of adventure, the idea of play, and I'm going to date myself. I'm going to sound like an old man here. So I was born in '76. I just turned 47 years old. So I was born in that like Gen X time frame where like you would leave in the morning on the weekend or in the summer, and you didn't have to be home until the street lights were on. And there was no level of like, we could have been out, like no one knew what the hell we were doing. Like we would go on adventures and find like abandoned warehouses and stuff like that, where now like parents are tracking their kids every move. I understand, like as a parent myself, 3 kids, we want to know where our kids are, but like I had this level of like, I had this independence and I could go on adventures. The other thing that we did as kids is like, we created games, we created activities and experiences. Right now, like if kids are together, they need an adult to be like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to play this game. Here are all the rules, or sign up for this rec team or this travel team or this exclusive travel team. They have to pay, $9 grand to play for the year. And we're going to have a hitting lesson here and the pitching lesson. And it's become so like, we put kids in these little boxes and this is exactly what we need you to do. There's so much to kids getting together, figuring out, okay, we're in this room right now. Here's the game that we're going to play. We're going to grab that like crystal ball over there and we're going to try to throw it at that thing without breaking it, right? And it's like, okay, that's going to be a little bit dangerous, but all right, we're going to learn how to do some dangerous shit carefully to learn about the experience. And then during that game, we're going to be like, okay, we have to make teams up for this. So what are the rules of this game? Not because Mr. So-and-so is telling us, let's figure out some rules, so some creativity there. All right, what makes this game fair? What should the teams be? Are we going to have all the fast people on one team and the slow on the other team, or we're going to mix it up? Like, what's the best way to do it? We're going to have captains choose what the teams are? All right, what happens if there's a foul? How do we handle it? Is it going to be like rock, paper, scissors, or are we going to do like a little slap box in the middle? Like what happens if somebody is pissed off, or after the game is over, what if one team smokes the other team? What do we do there? But we don't do that. We don't let kids like problem solve and do that stuff. And it's so important for kids to be able to manage those things. There's kids creating games and then managing the like fair play of those games. There's like 35 life skills that can potentially happen in that one experience.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to, it seems like since kids and everybody up until they're usually around 18 years old, we're always being told what we can and can't do, so that once you get into, you could say the real world of, you're no longer having someone tell you what to do, you're going back to, you're lost. You're like, okay, well, I've taken orders, all right, I need to do this because this person said it. Well, now nobody's telling me what to do. Well, now what?
Right.
And at that point, you're completely disgruntled. It's where do I go from here? What am I supposed to do? And you have no idea at all of what direction you should go in. And I think there needs to be more of a talk in our school system, incorporation of allowing kids to find out what some of their passions might be and to explore those. And because it's so much of, we're, like we were talking about before, we're still under the impression that you absolutely need to go to college. And also, my argument is that throughout elementary, middle school, high school, there's nothing in your classes that would even also promote, hey, this is what it would be like to be a doctor or to be a police officer, this and that. It's just, you're going to learn about math, this, and that. And obviously some people are passionate about math, this and that. That's great. But you could confidently say that most people aren't passionate about math, right? But it's something you have to take every single year. And so you get to this point where it's like, okay, well, I never liked history class. I never that's something that people would always ask me. Like, I remember I used to go to like my pediatrician when I was a little bit younger in my earlier days of high school, and then the people in guidance counselors would ask me, oh, what classes do you enjoy? Do you enjoy history, math? I'm like, I don't enjoy any of them.
Right. It all sucks.
And I'm like, well, so what are my options here? And so at this point in society, you just have to do your own research and doing your own discovering and try new things and discover new beliefs about yourself and the world, and that's how you find yourself, right? I mean, as sad as it sounds, because it would be beautiful if there was more incorporated into the school system that could help convey that, but I mean, I even go to the extent for myself of all the knowledge that I have that I share on the podcast and coaching and everyday conversations, and all the knowledge that I have, even though, of course, I don't know everything and never will. I'm learning new things every single day, and that's what keeps me young. I credit 95, aside from the basic, skills that schools taught me when I was younger, I credit 95% of my knowledge from everything I've learned from talking to people or my own experiences or research or watching YouTube and stuff like that. And it's like, I'm super grateful to have all those things that I discovered it. But I mean, how much better of a place would the world be if in the school system where you were forced to be there for 7 hours a day, if those passions and ideas were just contributed in there, I mean, how many boys would actually enjoy going to school?
100% agree with that. Yeah, that's the whole system needs to be, turned on its head and rebuilt again from the ground up. Incorporating more movement, incorporating more choice, incorporating more like what is something that you would be interested in. So for you, if it was more in a philosophical sense and more of an entrepreneurial sense, or it could be like creation of digital materials. All right, so here's what you're going to do. Like, you're going to find a mentor in the space. You're going to pitch some type of like a learning experience, and then go and do it. Like, roll up your sleeves and do it. And another thing that I recognize is that kids learn so much from failure, right? You played the game Super Mario Brothers?
Yes. At
some point, right? So I grew up with, I remember when it first came out, the initial Super Mario Brothers. And it was like the two-dimensional Mario, right? And it started off as a big guy. He's trying to save Princess Peach from Bowser. Like, that was the goal of the game. And so you'd go to a level 3-2, and, Mario would jump on a pipe and then jump to a little thing and then hit a turtle, and the turtle would hit him and he'd shrink down. Now he's a little Mario, and then you fall off a cliff and whatever. And you're like, oh shit, I'm in level 3-2. If I jump from here to here and then I hit the turtle, I have to jump quick again so the turtle doesn't hit me. Because if it does, I'll shrink or I'll die. And so the next time you play, I'm like, okay, I did something wrong, I failed, but I learned along the process. Super Mario Brothers didn't get you to a point where you lose, you get killed, and you go back to the very beginning of the game, so you have another shot to do it. And then you do it right, and you're like, okay, I'm going to get to level 3-3. And in level 3-3, you make a mistake, and you learn in the process of making a mistake. It's called the Super Mario effect in our brain. There's actually a TEDx talk called the Super Mario effect. And I analogize it to being like a kid walking for the first time. You're crawling around your parents' carpet, and you finally stand up, and you're wobbling around like a drunken sailor, and you take a step. And then you fall flat on your ass. For your parents, at the point, they're like, you know what, let me pick you up, and you're going to try again. They don't say, you gave it a shot, kid. Walking's just not for you. Just stick to the ground level, crawl around. They pick you up and you take 2 steps, and then you fall and you take 3 steps. And all of a sudden, people in the world are walking around because they learned how to do it by failing and failing and failing. It's like that with everything in the world. But what happens, I think, with parents especially, you get to a certain age where your kids do something, they fail at something, and it's like, you know what? You don't have to do that anymore. Or they don't like embrace, like, all right, what's something that you failed at today? Like, fail and fail and fail and fail and fail forward, and all of a sudden you find out the way. You found out a million ways to do it, and then something stuck in your brain that this makes sense, and you get better at it, and you get better at it. Especially when, as parents, we can give our kids something that they know is going to be challenging, and we're like, this is going to be hard, but you are stronger than this is hard. And so when kids embrace a challenging task, like in the way our brains work, neurobiologically, You know that this is a challenging task in front of you, and you see that challenging task through to completion, right? What it does is it lays these train tracks in your brain, so to speak, like these neural pathways in your brain. This was the start of it. I know it's going to be hard. I did it. It might have taken me an hour, 3 days, 2 months, but I was able to do it. The next challenging task that you know is going to be challenged is going to be easier for you to complete because you've already done it. Those pathways have been laid. And the more that you do that, the deeper that gets to where you're the type of person that will seek discomfort, that will be able to do those things. Conversely, if you know that there's a challenging task in front of you and it's going to take this amount of effort and you go about this far and you're like, yeah, I don't want to do it. What it does is it creates this like divide to where it's like the Grand Canyon now. The next challenging task, you're so much less likely to complete that next task and the next task, and then you just become the type of person that doesn't do hard shit. So as parents, I love those things, and I've like geeked out on the brain recently. Every single book that I'm reading right now, it's about how our brain interacts with our body. Those are 2 things as parents that you can do. One is like embrace failure, and then tell your kids like, this is going to be hard. You can do it. And then that's one of those times as parents, sometimes we have to pull our kids. Sometimes we have to push our kids. Don't let them give up on those challenging tasks. Like be there and keep going and helping them, understand the level of perseverance that it needs to overcome whatever challenging task is in front of them.
Yeah. And to your point of, if you quit, halfway through to not achieve that task, it's so much more likely that you're not going to do it for the next one. And then your kid gets to the point of saying, okay, well, I'm just a failure.
That's it.
And then you're done, right?
And it's a big difference saying that I failed at something rather than I am a failure, right? Where you talked before about I am depressed versus I suffer with depression.
Yeah, and failure, like you're explaining, is a great thing. That's how I like to talk about how positive experiences are amazing. You should strive to have more of them, but arguably speaking, you learn a lot more from the times where you don't succeed or you fail or you make a mistake, right? And it's all a learning lesson, and you have to be grateful that you're going through it because, you could have made that mistake 5 years down the line instead of now, and then you would have, that thing would have fell apart now. But now you experience it here in this moment, so now you can learn and take that wisdom that you gained from the mistake that you made into the future, and so you never make it again. And you can teach other people about it and help other people about it, and all of your negative experiences allow you to learn and then, realize why it happened. I mean, how many times, Dennis, in your life have you've been through a negative situation and then during the situation it absolutely sucked, and then after the fact you look back and you're like, oh, that's why that had to happen.
100%. I mean, there's been. I talk to my kids about it all the time. Whenever they're struggling with something, I'm like, you can't see the big picture yet, but you're going to look back and say, this had to happen for me to do this, this, and this. I can't even tell you, even in the last 3 or 4 years, something like this has come up where in the moment you're like, oh, I can't believe this is going on right now. And I've now trained myself. I'm experiencing something challenging in my life right now. And as I heard about it, I'm like, all right, I wonder what this is going to teach me here. Now I've been able to refocus myself in a way like this challenging experience. I'll definitely learn from this experience. I wonder what is going to come on the other side of this, because I know it's going to be something that I needed to learn to get to someplace on the other side of that wall that's in front of me right now.
Yes, absolutely. Dennis, thanks so much for coming on the show.
This is a good time. Appreciate it.
Where can people check out Building Men, the podcast, all that great stuff?
Anywhere you find podcasts, Building Men podcast, 190-something episodes in right now. About once a week, the podcast comes out. Really cool guests that I have on there. The other thing, buildingmen.io is my website. You find out where you can, bring me in to work with a school or as an individual coach. And building.men on Instagram. Those are the spaces. Depending on the age of your audience, I do a group called The Foundation. It's for young men, pretty much teenage years, and we meet once every 2 weeks. It's virtually, and I have kids from all over the country that are involved, and we meet and we talk about real stuff. And I bring on guest mentors to talk about, give them advice, give them, experiences, recommend books and podcasts and things like that. And dude, keep doing what you're doing, man. This is awesome. I have faith in our next generation because of this, so thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you in the next one.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, man.
Sir.
Appreciate it.
Let's see. All right, perfect.